I've been watching a movie every day in 2025, and that certainly kept me up to date on the newest releases and got me to catch up a bit on some of the recent ones I've missed. But I thought it might be fun once a week to take a look back at a classic that I had never seen before. And this is the 45th anniversary of the movie that made Richard Gere a star. Let's take a deep dive into American Gigolo. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my movie review for American Gigolo. This celebrated its 45th anniversary the first week of February, and this has become, Richard Gere's first big breakout role. He was, in a couple of supporting roles before this, but this rocketed his status into leading man. So we're going to talk about this movie here. I'd never seen it until a few weeks ago, and we'll look at some of the casting choices that led to Richard Gere playing the lead, and some of the other things behind the scenes about the movie, and then, of course, I will give you my review on it. But before all of that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to Dan Reviews It, I do mostly new movie and TV reviews, but look, like I said, I've been watching a movie every day this year, so obviously they can't all be new, so I've been taking deep dives into some older ones that I've never seen before, and there's already a few of those up on the channel in a playlist, so you can check those out. Just last week I did $1 Million Baby, and that was, what, the 20th anniversary for that, or 25th? 20th, I think. Anyway, regardless, this is the 45th anniversary for American Gigolo. So if you could just subscribe, if you are not one of my subscribers already, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for considering. All right, so I've actually seen a couple of Richard Gere movies recently that I've never seen before. Last year, when Louis Gossett Jr. died, I realized, I don't know that I'd ever seen any of his movies. I kind of looked through his filmography. I saw, his supporting roles and, more cameo-related roles in some more recent stuff. But An Officer and a Gentleman was, probably his biggest movie. He was nominated for it, and Richard Gere is the star of that, and Louis Gossett Jr. Is the supporting, and so I never saw that before, and I watched it, and it was pretty good, I have to say. But American Gigolo is another one that I'd never seen. In fact, look, Richard Gere never really appealed to me. I still haven't seen Pretty Woman. I know that's crazy, and that came out in 1990, so maybe I will do a 35th anniversary of Pretty Woman review this year. But I've seen some of his more recent stuff and enjoyed some, not so much others. But obviously, when I was coming up, he was one of the hot up and coming sex symbols. It was like him, Mel Gibson, Denzel. But Richard Gere played a lot of romantic roles as we got into the 90s, and this is I guess sort of where it started, because he is a male prostitute here in American Gigolo, which makes sense with the title. So this was directed by Paul Schrader and also written by him, and he was already, a hot commodity, having written Taxi Driver. Of course, he didn't direct that, but he wrote that, and so he considers this to be sort of a light bookend with Taxi Driver. And then this was produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, one of his earlier films as well. And this is before he was even connected with Don Simpson. They did the Bruckheimer-Simpson movies in most of the 90s. I think they were a pair, Armageddon and Con Air, and some of those. Don Simpson died several years ago, but Bruckheimer's still doing it. He produces the Bad Boys movies, and, he's still got irons in the fire so many years later, so good for him. But let's see. I guess we'll talk about some of the casting stuff before we get into the actual movie. So the original choice was John Travolta, not by Paul Schrader, but the studio wanted John Travolta. He was obviously very, very hot coming off of Saturday Night Fever and some other movies, and obviously TV started with Welcome Back, Kotter. But there were a couple reasons, reportedly, that John Travolta did not get the job. He wanted final cut approval, and Paul Schrader was like, I don't think so. But then Travolta's parents both got sick, so he was like, you know what, I'm going to bow out anyway. I've got to take care of my parents, so let's never mind on that. But what's interesting is that this is one of at least several other examples where Richard Gere replaced John Travolta in a role maybe that he was offered and turned down, or that they were eyeing him for, or maybe that he accepted and didn't work out or whatever. But Chicago was originally a Travolta possibility. Days of Heaven and An Officer and a Gentleman from 1982. So it's interesting. Richard Gere kind of following in Travolta's footsteps. And when I said the up and coming hot actors of the '80s, maybe I should have mentioned Travolta, but I feel like he was more up and coming in the '70s. Certainly by the '80s, he was pretty much an established star. But apparently, he did keep all the Armani suits that were tailor made for him for the film, because him and Richard Gere did not wear the same cut of suit, so he was able to keep those. And Richard Gere really wasn't the second choice either. Barry Diller from Paramount had talked to Christopher Reeve, who turned down an offer of $1 million to make the movie. Chevy Chase was offered the role. I think that would have been terrible, but he was certainly making a name for himself in movies at the time. So Schrader went back to his first choice, which was Richard Gere, and he was hired 2 weeks before filming began. So they really had to, get him fitted and get him to know the script and all of that sort of stuff. But Travolta was cast in the picture long enough that he even did like a photo shoot with Armani for Variety magazine, announcing that he was going to be in the movie. So he had the role and decided eventually that it wasn't for him. But okay, so we had Lauren Hutton here, and she was already hired by the time Richard Gere was on. But Meryl Streep was offered that role, but declined. She did not care for the tone of the film. Interesting. I mean, look, this is definitely, for 1980, this is, kind of a daring picture. Look, the '70s sort of blew the movie industry up in the sense of, thematic things in films and pushing boundaries and all of that. And, Streep is a young actress. Maybe she didn't think that it was a good look, to do a movie like this. But yeah, that would have been an interesting casting choice. But Glenn Close auditioned as well when Travolta was still attached. She did not get an offer for the part. And Julie Christie was offered the part originally when Travolta was part of it, but when Richard Gere was hired, the chemistry wasn't right, so they passed on her. Well, actually, I guess before Richard Gere was hired, but when Travolta dropped out, Christie was not a part of the film anymore either. So a few casting what-ifs there for this movie. Then you've got the matter of Blondie's Call Me, which is the theme from American Gigolo, and it took Blondie to #1. I think that was their first #1, although maybe Heart of Glass had come out by then, because Heart of Glass was #1 as well. But in any event, she had seen sort of a rough cut of the movie and was inspired by the driving scene in the intro and visualized that opening sequence when she wrote the lyrics. However, she already had a rough cut of the music, because the person that did the score, Giorgio Moroder, gave her sort of a rough instrumental track, which at the time was titled Man Machine. And she heard that and sort of wove it into what we now know as Call Me. Because a lot of the score is sort of a instrumental version of sorts of Call Me. We only really hear the vocal version, I think, the one time in the opening credits. And this is also known for two things, this movie. Not only making Richard Gere, a big star, but it was widely credited as establishing Giorgio Armani in Hollywood. He was known in Italy, but not really much in the U.S. But because the Julian character wears all of these Armani suits and he looks great in them and all of that, it kind of established him as being a big name in clothing design. And then it also has the nudity. Richard Gere is nude in this movie. You do see the whole thing, full frontal here, and obviously that was big for the time. Now, at the time, you got to remember, in 1980, porno theaters were big, so there was a lot of nudity in those types of movies, adult XXX movies. But in a Hollywood R-rated movie, sure, there were women parts, but for the most part, full frontal male nudity, no, it didn't happen, especially for your leading man. So it was interesting in that regard. And Gere has said that he was actually drawn to the role because there was a bit of a gay subtext there. He said, I read it and I thought, this is a character I don't know very well. I don't even own a suit. He speaks languages. I don't speak any languages. He does speak English, of course, but he didn't say that. But he said there's kind of a gay thing that's flirting throughout it, and I didn't know the gay community at all. I wanted to immerse myself in all of that, and I had literally 2 weeks, so I just dove in. Quote from Richard Gere about that. I mean, I love that. That's awesome, you know? And it's interesting because I wonder if that's one of the things that also sort of in the back of Travolta's mind led him to say no to the movie eventually, because gay rumors have kind of dogged Travolta's entire career. I don't know if it was like that back then, but certainly in the more recent decades, that's sort of been part of his, the rumor mill about him is, oh, John Travolta, might be gay, whatever. Yeah, and I'm gay, so obviously that doesn't affect my mind about his work or anything. But I think that's, as a gay man, I think that's really cool that Richard Gere actually was drawn to that portion of the script in the 80s. Like that's really, really cool. So anyway, that's enough of the background of this movie. Let's get to the plot here real quick, and then I'll give you my thoughts. So he is, like I mentioned, an escort, a high-priced escort in LA, named Julian, and he becomes romantically involved with a very prominent politician's wife, who is the Lauren Hutton character, Michelle. And he ends up being the prime suspect in a murder case, and he is trying to clear his name, but he obviously is sort of beholden to some code, and he doesn't necessarily want to reveal that, oh no, I was with her the night of the murder, so I couldn't have done it, because obviously that blows up her spot. And so there's some sexual intrigue here, and there is some politics at play. So that's, the general idea here. I liked this movie. I didn't love it, but I liked it, certainly for what it was. And, I think about these more classic movies in the time period in which they were released. In 1980, obviously, this took a pretty big swing, not only with the full frontal male nudity, but you've got the subject matter is very, very intense and gritty. And like I said, the 70s sort of ushered in that era. Taxi Driver, sort of one of the main flag holders for that. And since this is written by the same person, it makes sense that this would have a lot of sort of those elements of, the seedy city and the seedy underbelly of people. And, this one involves obviously a very serious crime that now this guy who is young and doesn't even really know the world around him yet, much like probably Richard Gere at the time, like he said in that quote. And so it's a very, very interesting dynamic between, character and the actual, piece itself. The dialogue, I don't know, is ever like this, A+ type dialogue. Nobody goes around quoting American Gigolo like we do Taxi Driver, but Richard Gere's performance is really great here. It was interesting to see because, like I said, I know him mostly as an older gentleman. Even in Pretty Woman, he was already sort of, gray, at least, around the temples or whatever. And I feel like this was such a young, even though they were only 10 years removed, this is such a younger performance from Richard Gere. And again, I just saw him recently in Officer and a Gentleman for the first time, and so this is in that same era, and I really love what he does with this character. And all the people around him. And it's not just those two in the movie. You also have a young Hector Elizondo. This was the first thing I had ever seen him in, certainly the earliest anyway, as the main detective sort of on the case. Frances Bergen is here as well, and she is indeed the mother of Candice Bergen. I looked that up after I saw the name, because of course I knew Candice Bergen came from a Hollywood family, so she was in it as well. Those are the only people I really recognize, but you have Bill Duke as well, who appeared in a lot of 70s black movies like Car Wash. Not necessarily blaxploitation, but more the black ensemble comedies. And then more recently he was in some of the X-Men movies and whatever. So he's been around, but He has a pretty big role here as well. But look, I would say the biggest negative of this movie is that Bruckheimer's style, as producer, has always been style over substance. Those 90s movies I mentioned, Armageddon, Con Air he did. I think he did The Rock as well. And then, of course, into, the Bad Boys era and that kind of stuff. His movies have always been style over substance. And this movie is not that because it's a drama. It's not an action movie. There are, a few action oriented scenes, I guess. But certainly this is a drama. This is more about the characters. This is more about the situations than it is about any sort of explosions. The style here over the substance really comes more from the Armani wardrobe and, the style of the characters, literally, as opposed to the style of the film. But I do think that there is some sort of seeds here of Bruckheimer's let's make everything look glossy. Let's, make everybody look to the nines here. As opposed to like, let's just get down to the dialogue. But look, obviously these people are going to be well dressed. They're politicians. He's a gigolo. He's got to, earn that money from his higher end clients. So it's not like I'm not saying it's like Armageddon. Armageddon is so much style over substance, and The Rock and those other movies. It's not like that, but there's a thread here that you could see, like the early Bruckheimer's brain moving or something in that regard. But look, Paul Schrader, I think he wrote a pretty good script, not a great one. The mystery element. It sort of goes away because we know he didn't do it. But there is the question of how is he going to get out of it? Is he going to betray, the trust of the wife that he's been sleeping with? There is that element to it, but I don't think it elevates it to a great script like a Taxi Driver, for example. But look, I think certainly for the time period, this is a really solid film. I'm sort of torn between like a B or a B plus here. I will give it the benefit of the doubt, I guess, because it did launch Richard Gere's career into the stratosphere, and he's excellent here. And this movie was not like a huge hit at the box office. I should say that it was made for $5 million, and worldwide it made $52 million. So pretty big hit. But I think in the U.S. It was more like 30 or 40 million or something. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but it was a bit less. But that's the worldwide take, was 52 million. So it certainly made money for Paramount, but it wasn't like in the top 10 movies of the year or anything like that. But I will leave American Gigolo with a B plus. We'll leave it there. And I watched this on Paramount Plus. Makes sense. It's a Paramount film. So you can check this out now if you so desire on Paramount Plus. And the next one on the docket for the classics line is going to be The Beach. Leonardo DiCaprio's follow-up to Titanic came out in 2000. So we're doing the 25th anniversary. I had never seen it until a couple of weeks ago. And so that will be my next classic review. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.